Dobar dan in dobrodošli, drage dame, spoštovani gospodi, lepo vas je videti v tako velikem številu. Večina konference bo v angleščini, če boste potrebovali prevod, kar uporabite svoje slušalke. Imamo kolege, kolegice, ki bodo poskrbeli, da bomo razumljivi. Dear ladies and gentlemen, no panic, no stress. Most of the conference is going to be in English. A warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Slovenia. Do I have any first-timers in the country? First time? Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. My name is Mujca Mavec. I'm a journalist. I will be guiding you today and tomorrow. And you know, Slovenia is the only country with love in the name. Did you know that? You take the S away and it's Lavinia. And love is here for so many reasons. First of all, we love to have you around. And we love to talk about our country, wherever we go. And it's unique, you know. It's the only country in Europe where 4 very different geographical regions are coming together. So we have the Alps, we have the Adriatic Sea, we have the Karst, this wonderful limestone region. And in the east we have the Pannonian Plain, which is a bit of Hungary, lowlands. So it's really unique. You can really get a little bit of everything in a very short time. And wherever you go in Slovenia, nature is just around the corner. So we can see the changes very, very much in our country. That's why sustainability is becoming a way of our life, not only in tourism, even though we are the first green destination in the world. So we live those challenges, and that's why we're particularly proud to host this conference today. It's a big team behind from very different sections, but there are 2 reasons that we are delighted to host this circular economy hotspot, because Slovenia in 2025, well, we mark 2 anniversaries. We celebrate 2 anniversaries this year. It's been 10 years since Slovenia organized its very first international conference on the circular economy, and 10 years since the European Union adopted its very first circular economy action plan, recognizing that material use is one of the key levers to achieve climate, environmental, and biodiversity goals. And the challenge is enormous. Our consumption of materials already exceeds the capacity of our planet. So by 2050, humanity could be consuming at a level that would require 3 planets. But we only have one, which is why this gathering is so important, not only to us, to everybody, to ask 3 simple but urgent questions. Where are we? What can we do? And how can we do it? So Slovenia applied, together with Circular Change, the Strategic Research and Innovation Partnership for Circular Economy and the Slovenian Center for Circular Economy to host this year's hotspot. So here we are. It's raining outside. That's a wonderful opportunity to stay inside, to stay together, to debate, and trying to make this world a little bit a better place. We have 2 days for that. So please, let me invite to the stage to officially open this conference, Mr. Bojan Kumer, who is the Minister for Environment, Climate and Energy of Slovenia. Welcome. Dobrodošli. Izvolite.
Hvala lepa, Mojca, za tako lep uvod in najavo. Res smo za vas uredili najboljšo možno vreme. Tako da, če slučajno vsebine ne bodo ustrezne, vam bo vreme preprečevalo, da boste čim več tukaj. In slišali ravno zaradi tega, zakaj smo danes organizirali skupaj še z drugim ministrstvom. Za mene osebno in za moje sodelavce na ministrstvu res pomemben dogodek, pomembno konferenco, ki naslavlja, bom rekel, prihodnost vseh nas. Ne danes, ne to, kar je bilo včeraj, ampak to, kar bo jutri in to, kar bo naslednji teden in to, kar bo dejansko se dotaknilo vseh nas. Načeloma se nas to že dotika, ampak podzavestno dajemo to na stran, dokler se nekaj ne zgodi. In dokler se nekaj ne zgodi, nas potem opomne na vse pretekle zamujene priložnosti in na vse tiste ko smo odrivali določene stvari na stran. Tako da, spoštovane dame, tako kot je Mojca res lepo uvod naredila v zvezi z imenom Slovenija, gospodje, ekscelence, cenjeni gostje vsi, res lepo pozdravljeni na današnji konferenci, ki ne bo govorila samo o krožnem gospodarstvu, ampak predvsej bolj široko in na kateri si želimo osvetliti možnosti razvoja za našo skupno prihodnost. Vsi že vemo in govorimo, da bo morala biti naša prihodnost oblikovana drugače. Bolj pravično, bolj odgovorno, predvsem pa bolj trajnostno. Ravnanje z viri na način, kot je bilo še nedolgo nazaj nekaj popolnoma vsakdanjega, ne bo več mogoče. Tako da moramo nekaj spremeniti danes, ker smo mogoče premalo spreminjali včeraj, zato da bomo lahko ohranjali naš skupni planet in našo skupno vizijo, našo skupno prihodnost, zato da bomo imeli bolj kakovosten zrak, zato da bomo imeli na koncu koncev zagotovljeno preživetje na našem edinem planetu, ne samo za nas, za človeka, za družbo, ampak dejansko za vse žive bitja, za vsa živa bitja na Zemlji. Imamo res samo en planet. Mogoče se tega premalo zavedamo. Zato moramo najti pravo, predvsem pa izvedljivo pot prehoda v pravičnejši družbeni model. Krožno gospodarstvo se v tem smislu kaže ne samo kot korak v pravo smer, ampak kot neka najenostavnejša, najbolj izvedljiva pot, ki mogoče zahteva malce individualnega napora vsakega izmed nas. In to bomo poskušali naslavljati, da se velike spremembe navadno začenjajo v prvi osebi ednine. Zagotovo krožno gospodarstvo ohranja vrednost materialov, podaljšuje življenjski cikel izdelkov, spodbuja inovativnost, zagotovo tudi ustvarja nova delovna mesta, ampak ne samo nova. To so bolje plačana delovna mesta. Ponavadi imajo ta delovna mesta v sebi utkano neko misijo, neko večvrednost. Ljudje radi pripadajo, da so del prihodnosti, del vizije, ki pelje v boljšo, svetlejšo prihodnost. Predvsem pa vse to krepi konkurenčnost gospodarstva, s čimer seveda ne prinaša le koristi za industrijo in gospodarstvo, temveč na konec koncev tudi za vse ljudi. V času, ko se soočamo s podnebnimi in sočasno tudi geopolitičnimi tveganji, ponavadi to dvoje se povezuje, kadarkoli je karkoli slabega, je vse krivo nenaslavljanje podnebnih sprememb, je zagotovo krožno gospodarstvo tisto, ki pomeni strateško odpornost, manjšo odvisnost od uvoženih surovin, večjo samostojnost, večjo samozadostnost, več odločamo sami o sebi, boljše se počutimo in imamo zagotovo manj neprevidljivo prihodnost. In to ne samo za nas ljudi, ampak celotno evropsko gospodarstvo. V tej dvorani smo trenutno predstavniki različnih organizacij, različnih generacij, vsi pa smo samo posamezniki, katerim bodo uspešni modeli krožnega gospodarstva prenesli nižje življenjske stroške in to je dokazljivo. Nižje življenjske stroški pomenijo, da bomo imeli trajnejše izdelke. Imeli bomo seveda boljša in nova delovna mesta in še bi lahko našteval. Naj bo to vodilo ob vsakem nakupu, ob vsaki storitvi ter vsakodnevni izbiri, ki oblikuje naš način življenja. Ne samo to, da živimo v času sprememb, ampak te spremembe so včasih za marsikoga ne bodi ga treba, za marsikoga drugega v tej skupini so pa zagotovo priložnost. Ampak če smo skupaj in se zedinimo v skupni prihodnosti, je lahko to naša skupna, ne samo največja, ampak edina priložnost. Čas je, da potegnemo zavoro divjemu potrošništvu. da zasnujemo izdelke, ki nas bodo preživeli in da iz odpadkov ustvarimo novo vrednost. Pri vsem tem nas mora voditi odgovornost do naših zanamcev. Naša naloga je torej jasna, od besed takoj k dejanjem. Ta dejanja morajo pokazati ne samo razvoj, ampak predvsem skrb za okolje, skrb za podnebje, ki seveda ne stojita vsak na svoji strani bregov, ampak gresta z roko v roki in sta garant za naše skupno boljše življenje. V Evropski uniji smo se zavezali, da se leta 2026 sprejme akt o krožnem gospodarstvu. Ta naj bi ukrepil enotni trg za sekundarne surovine in odpadke ter pospešil prehod v krožno gospodarstvo. Zakaj je to pomembno? V zadnjih 15 letih se namreč stopnja uporabe krožnih materialov skoraj ni povečala. Še vedno smo preveč odvisni od uvoza kritičnih surovin, trg sekundarnih materialov pa je razpršen, razdrobljen in načeloma tudi premalo razvit. Po podatkih Evropske komisije je trenutna stopnja krožne uporabe materialov znotraj Evropske unije zgolj 11,8%. Verjamem, da nas danes druži skupna vizija nujnosti prehoda na krožno gospodarstvo. Zato mi je res, iskreno, v veliko veselje, da letošnjo konferenco gostimo v Sloveniji, v Plečnikovi Ljubljani. Arhitekta Jožeta Plečnika, ki je živel v prvi polovici prejšnjega stoletja, omenjam, ker je že takrat dajal velik poudarek ponovni rabi in recikliranju ter kakovostni zasnovi v začetku, v originalu. V eni izmed njegovih cerkva blizu Ljubljane lahko najdemo lestence izdelane iz kavnih mlinčkov in kozarcev, podporne stebre iz vodovodnih cevi. Za hišo, v kateri je živel, je uporabil ostanke stebrov, plošč in drugih elementov, ki so mu ostali od drugih projektov. In te stavbe stojijo še danes. Kaj nam to pove? Plečnik je že takrat dokazoval, da lahko trajnost, funkcionalnost in estetika hodijo z roko v roki. Nekoč je družba že znala živeti po načelih krožnega gospodarstva in prav na tej dediščini lahko gradimo tudi danes. Zatorej, spoštovani, naj bo današnja konferenca prostor povezovanja, prostor razprav in naj bo tudi prostor, kjer iz besed nastanejo zaveze, iz teh zavez nastanejo obljube in iz teh obljub konkretne ukrepi. Ne bo enostavno, nikoli ni bilo enostavno, ampak sem prepričan, da bomo svoje znanje še ukrepili, da imamo dovolj energije, dovolj tudi tistega pozitivnega namena in predvsem, da bomo zbrali ves potrebni pogum, da postane krožno gospodarstvo nekaj tisto, kar si vsi želimo, običajnega, vsakdanjega. Torej, da ga bomo živeli iz dneva v dan, iz ure v uro. Naj vas to misel spremlja, ne samo tekom te današnje konference, ampak mogoče, ko boste odhajali iz konference. Želim vam uspešno delo. Hvala.
Hvala lepa. Hvala. And how wonderful of Minister Kumar to mention Jože Plečnik. For my first timers in Slovenia, so Ljubljana is really the home of architect Jože Plečnik. He was really one of the most important architects here in the region. And he was one who already recycled hundreds of years ago, reusing old materials. We even sometimes recycle bridges over here in the city. So really a good example of, the principles we should live today. And it's a pleasure to welcome you here in Rock Center, which used to be a bicycle factory, and today it's a culture center which is made by circular principles, and they live their own sustainability. So tomorrow we'll be joined by the head of the center, and she will tell us a little bit more about this wonderful place. So we were hoping till the very last to welcome Commissioner Roswell over here in Slovenia. Unfortunately, she had to cancel last minute, but she sent us a video message. Let's greet her, the Commissioner.
Dear friends, I'm sorry that I am not able to join you in person today, but I'm very glad to have the opportunity to join you all in this format. This forum is an opportunity to discuss ideas for how to break away from a cycle that is hurting citizens, damaging economies, and destroying ecosystems. We extract, produce, consume, dump, and waste, and then we start from scratch and do it all over again. In the last 50 years, global extraction has more than tripled, and less than 12% of materials are reused. We are using natural resources nearly twice as fast as ecosystem can regenerate them. We need to break this destructive spiral, and circularity is the answer. It is a concrete path to a cleaner, more competitive, and more sustainable future, one defined by less waste and more value. Europe can and must lead the way, and we're already taking important steps. With the Clean Industrial Deal, we are setting out a clear vision for boosting competitiveness based around a circular economy. First, circular business models are innovative by nature and challenge our linear way of doing business. Second, circular use of materials means more energy efficiency and fewer emissions. And third, reducing our dependencies on virgin materials boosts our economic security and our autonomy. We will continue to develop the right conditions in Europe for innovative circular businesses to thrive. Circularity allows us to swap to a more sustainable and regenerative economic model. It is a win for citizens, win for businesses, win for ecosystems, and for future generations. The circular economy hotspots in Slovenia is an important part of that journey. Showcasing innovative practices, sharing best business models, and crucially, inspiring action. You have my full support. Thank you all, and good luck for the discussions ahead.
I just want to check who's with us today. Who represents the public administration, the policies? How many people are here? Okay, it's nice. Who is from the industries? Civil society? Wonderful, because you are exactly what we need to change something, and we can contribute, everybody can, if we scan the code right now, because we want you to participate, to answer some questions we have, and we might share some opinions at the end of today's conference. So do scan the code and just answer for very, very quick questions while we're discussing the next topic. And you will need some headsets as well, because we will be talking a bit Slovenian and English in the panel discussion. And we'll do it in 3 rounds, talking a little bit about the policies, about the practice, and at the end about, well, it will be a call of action. So what to do and what is the potential of the circular economy. I will be joined on stage by a few guests, and I would like to start with inviting Mr. Eric Mamer, the Director General at the European Commission's Directorate for Environment. Eric, thank you. Welcome. You can maybe take your seat. Uroš Weigl, the State Secretary at the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Energy of Slovenia. Uroš, dobrodošli. Mateusz Frangež, who is the State Secretary at the Ministry of the Economy, Tourism and Sport. Dobrodošli. In Antonia Božič-Cerar from the Department of Environmental Protection, Climate and Energy at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I hope everybody is comfortable enough. So thank you very much for joining. And we have a bit of time, so we have a few rounds. So we do like 3 rounds, and everybody has like around 2-3 minutes to answer. And of course, everybody is invited to join in. It would be great to have some concrete questions from your field of expertise. So let's talk a little bit to begin about the policies, the policy foundation. And the first question goes to Eric, because the EU, Eric, has been a global leader in circular economy policy, from the action plan to the eco-design for sustainable products regulation, and now a consultation for the upcoming Circular Economy Act. Could you share with us what you see as the most critical measures that will help Europe finally break the linear model and build a real single market for circular products? Because we are in need. We've listened to Susanna, and the situation is really bad.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm representing Commissioner Rosval. You would have had a gender-balanced panel had she not been held up by the President's speech in the European Parliament today on the future of the European Union. So very much aligned with the issues which Mrs. Skalska was presenting. Your question is actually a very forward-looking one. We're still at the phase where we are thinking about, of course, the most adequate measures. And because we don't want to do politics that are basically window dressing, we have to look at the issues in depth. But when we're talking circular economy, in fact, we should be saying circular economies, because actually it depends a lot on the waste streams that you are reusing. Now, we know that there are some waste streams where things work relatively well. For example, steel or aluminium, at least to a certain extent. There are others where they don't work so well, such as textiles. Or construction materials that come from demolition of old buildings. So we have to go for tailored solutions that are adapted to each waste stream and also to the different steps that you have from collecting the waste to the fact that the recycled products are then bought by industry. But of course we know that some of the key factors that we will have to look at are linked to collecting what is most valuable. And in particular, this is linked, for example, to the critical raw materials that you have in electronics. For the moment, they're not collected at all. So that's certainly something that we need to look at. We know as well that we need to ensure that we have markets available for these products. We had a conference in Brussels a short time ago, and a gentleman was saying that recycled textile fibers cost €2 per kilo compared to €1 per kilo for those that come directly from fossil fuels, from chemicals. And therefore, of course, they are much more difficult to put on the market, to find buyers. So we have to come up with schemes, for example, through obligations on public procurement, or through measures that will collect demand from industry so that there is enough value in order to make products at scale and therefore reduce the price. So those are the types of measures. But I think we have to really remember it's about tailored solutions. It's about making sure that you can have investors who come, and for that you need to build a business case.
Tailored solutions. Gospod Weigel, let's go now to Slovenia to see where we are, maybe on some concrete cases. Torej EU, slišali smo, določa okvir, velikokrat smo ga danes že omenili, tudi minister je podal smernice, a izvedba poteka na nacionalni ravni. Kje so trenutno prednostne naloge vašega ministrstva in s kakšnimi izzivi se srečujete pri prenosu krožne politike v samo prakso pri nas?
Ja, prvo lep pozdrav vsem. Mi trije Slovenci tukaj na odru smo se prej malo posvetovali, pa smo rekli, da bomo v angleščini, tako da bom jaz tudi...
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, we
switch to
English. Yes.
So that we have a harmonized approach.
Thank you for that. It makes things much easier.
So as far as legislation goes, we've done some amendments in the time of this government's mandates, but probably the biggest one relating to circular economy is yet to come, in preparational criteria for end of waste of construction, or end of waste criteria for construction waste. But when dealing with legislation, I wanted to stress a couple of points, and one important one being that for the true transition to a circular economy, it's really the European approach that we need, because a lot of the regulation that we need to do is not waste regulation, but regulation on design and on placing on market, which are things that are directly linked with the internal market, and it's not something that each member state can do by itself. We've had good approaches with this already. There's a change in the European Union that the waste legislation is becoming more and more circular. So again, not dealing with the waste, but dealing with waste prevention. And this criteria is becoming, this legislation is becoming a lot more complex and more difficult to implement. And in the implementation, it's actually our two ministries, the economy and environment, that have to partner up on this. We've gone some lengths already on batteries, which was the first such approach, and we're continuing on now with packaging, and we were looking forward to end-of-life vehicles. But this is the approach that is actually needed in order to really to handle not only waste, but make this whole change into a circular economy. But one issue I wanted to stress as well is this legislation that I've mentioned is mainly linked to the supply side. So it's a lot of supply side action. We have to do also a lot on demand side. Part of this is regulation, so in government sector, for instance, green public procurement. Also, we have a strategy for the sustainable development of our public administration that has been adopted. But there is one area where we want to go further, and that is on promoting sustainable consumption, also by consumers as such. In the State of the Environment Report 2022 was the first time that we had a chapter on sustainable consumption. We definitely linked this to environmental pressures, and it's the first time that we have a recognized set of benchmarks where we stand, also in an international perspective. We're now preparing a communication campaign on sustainable consumption, and there is one point I finish off with, and that's a lesson that we learned from this public opinion poll, and it's somewhat linked also to the perspective that Susanna mentioned before. So what will happen, what are drivers really for change, what are drivers for our society? One thing that we recognize from this public opinion poll is that about 20 to 30% of the population is really triggered by the devastating prospects that were mentioned. So what is happening with our planet, what is happening with our environment due to our unsustainable way of life. 20 to 30% is directly motivated by this. And if we highlight this as the main goal, we're basically speaking to the ones that are already on our side. If we want to gather more support for the change necessary for circular change and for the circular change, what we need to do is that we have to also communicate the what to me are co-benefits, but nevertheless the fact that circular practices are often cheaper, they're more cost effective, they bring that environmental standards bring about health benefits. These are things that will allow us to motivate a larger part of the population. And it's this motivation of the larger part of the population that we need in order to be able to pass stricter legislation, but also to ensure better respect of this legislation.
We started in Slovenian, so my question was about concrete cases, since we have two secretaries of state, as well Mr. Frangoš is representing the Ministry for Economics and Sports and Tourism. How do you see the situation in the circular economy, and how does the Ministry encourage innovation in that field?
Can I stay a bit on the line Ms. Skalska presented during her amazing keynote? By the way, the liminal word was described beautifully in 1929 by Antonio Gramsci. He wrote in his prison diaries that the crisis consists exactly in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And in this interregnum, a variety of morbid symptoms appear. And I totally agree, we are in this interregnum with variety of morbid symptoms. And, you know, it was really an eye-opening year, last year, when the results of European elections came. With all the progressive change former European Commission advocated, with eco-design, for example, maybe being the best case of really good regulatory change, with European strategic attempt to avoid all the strategic and fossil fuel derived dependencies. But what happened? A strong rise of the other extreme that was so important that in the last year, EU already changed its vocabulary. No one talks about the green transition anymore. Now we have what? Clean transition? We don't talk about net zero industries. Now these are clean technologies. And it seems to me that the most important change in Europe is always in taxonomy. Why am I talking about this? Because, Uroš, you mentioned they're already on our side. And you know me, I'm totally on this progressive circular green side. I totally understand all the consequences we face as society and as a planet if we do not change. And I see the biggest changes in global economy, in human history. And I would really like to see that all of us join and see this as a huge opportunity to make this world really better, our business models more sustainable, and our societies more just. It's an excellent opportunity. But we are not there yet. There is a strong social response that says no. Because these transformations, and we all know these are good transformations, they have a lot of side effects. And what they are building this extreme right that refuses to accept the need of change. Trump is an exact phenomenon deriving from opposition to change. Make America great again. Make America like it was in the 80s. So, what I'm trying to say, I'm sorry for being too long. Yes, it's about the market gaps. Yes, it's about incentives. It's about the good mixture between regulation and, on the other hand, the knowledge of the opportunity of the new business models coming from the other industry that will change my industry if I will not adapt. We have a record liquidity of Slovenian economy at the moment. We still perform among one of the best years in profits. And our companies have record low debt. But the investment of our businesses is falling. In this crucial time when we should all understand that transformation is about investing, about innovating, about uniting and collaborating to bring those innovations to the market. But why do businesses fear? Because of this major uncertainty. Because not only the economic uncertainty, it is very clear, we are in front of the major change in economic and business chains. Our economy is used to produce cost-effectively a material, a component, a part, an engine that someone else will integrate into their final product.
You described very well the mood. So what can politics do to
Well,
help this transition?
I think that we should start by very sincere conversation. Why we need to change. And it's not only, about I have a very good reminder about all the technical stuff we provide to the industry that the industry can adapt. But I think that it's not about 25% of the investment the businesses will maybe gain from the state in order to change. I think that the problem is much more complex, and it's in our minds. You called for the mindset change, right? So I think it's not about us and them. We should bridge the gap in the society. Otherwise, we will not see the change we want to see. The change will be much more radical and not in our favor.
So to work together. And Mrs. Applaus, hvala. And Mrs. Božić-Cerar, you are working very closely with companies. Is this the mood they are in, and how do you help them, how to tackle?
Well, I read, if I start from another side, I read that Groucho Marx said it's not difficult getting old, you just have to live long enough. So because I've been living quite a long time, I would like to say that industry and the economy has always seen waste more as a resource than as a waste. In Slovenia, we had an environmental, we had a waste act in 1978. That was 3 years after the first directive. And it said that waste should go to production processes or to the natural metabolism. So we know how to do circular. We've just lost our way in recent years. And also Slovenia had an agreement with the other Yugoslav states where they had an agreement on secondary materials. So we know about secondary materials. We had a different mindset then. And if we look at the EU legislation and the definition of waste, it's what we discard, we want to discard, have to. And it's very easy to discard, but it's very difficult to bring it back into the cycle. And if we look at the definition for recycling, it means that we get a product or a material which serves the same purpose as the original one or another purpose. And then we got end of waste and secondary materials, byproducts, and all of what, a couple of paragraphs later in the directive we read, after it's recycled, we have to check if it applies, if end of waste applies. Isn't the definition of recycling that we get a new product or that we return the material into the economy? So I think that we just have to, yes, change our mindsets and maybe not thinking so much about discarding, but about how we can cooperate and reuse what we already have.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just about regulation, it's changing the mindset in general.
And also about regulation, because even though we have a common directive, in one member state something can become end of waste or it's a byproduct. The moment it crosses the border, it's a waste again. So it's very easy to get to waste.
Lots of new regulation coming up, definitely. But could we mention maybe a good example here from Slovenia of a company, of somebody who
Slovenia has a long tradition of recycling. Quite a lot of our GDP comes from recycling. If we look at the steel industry, which was mentioned before, aluminium, glass, plastics. Also, we have Aquafil, which is a very innovative company on the field of plastics. So, of course, we have very good examples also. We just mustn't forget about them.
Mr. Frankosz, where do you see, what tools could we use to be more successful in circular economy in Slovenia, if we're talking about the region?
Well, we are very proud that together with Ministry of Environment, Climate and Energy, we've published a successful public call to establish the Slovenian Center for Circular Economy. Antonia here is a leading force of it. And this is meant as a know-how think tank empowering businesses with best practices, knowledge, but also technical support in order to start the evolution businesses have to do. Second, I think it is very true that the impact of our industries will happen outside those industries. And that's why we are focusing at large on the new businesses, startups. Our strong strategic research and innovation partnerships, combining both academia, industry, startups, and the government, in order to identify the areas where we can boost the innovation that can become a new industrial, let's say, narrative. But of course, we acknowledge huge gaps. If we want to, and for example, the Munich IAA was mentioned before, if we can look at the trends of, for example, automotive industry, and automotive industry is a very important industry in Slovenia, in strong correlation also with our strong industry of materials. Antonia mentioned before some excellent cases of long-lasting circular tradition in those industries. But let's not forget that our industry of materials are among energy most efficient industries in the world, right? Our primary aluminium processing factory, now already factory, was one of two most energy efficient facilities in the world, immediately after the Norwegian one. So we have this tendency to improve our processes. But for this big transformation ahead, of course, a strong incentive from the state will be needed. So regulation will set the way, but support for innovation, and let me just remind you that this government is putting the record height of incentives in the R&D, in innovation, as well as at the moment we have a record high incentives also for investments to breach the risks industry will face when introducing new innovations to the market. I was mentioning IAA before, and I will finish with that. And we can see cars built from totally new materials using recycling as the law or in constructing those vehicles. And even in this case, we have examples. For example, the GREMO, Green Mobility Initiative in Slovenia, which is an industrial partnership with the government in order to introduce new materials, new designs, that will change the industry. And in that sense, our ministry is just confirming the project Lightweight that promises to build a new generation of materials to the market in order to compete with the global competition with the most efficient materials in terms of energy as well as the used material.
And like you said, let's sit down and work together. So we'll try to get all the industries and things together. You wanted to add something,
I wanted to.
Weigel?
What Mateusz, it's interesting. I mean, he'll be the more green. He has made more of the green statements, and I'll make some of the business-friendly statements. But it's probably because we meet each other too often. Now, just to say, I wanted on the question of regulation, a small introspection also from my side. Seeing what is happening now with these omnibus initiatives and the deregulation at the EU level, simplification, it's called simplification, not deregulation. Well, I wanted to say that it's something that I think is very good for the green agenda, because one thing that probably one area where I believe that we have gone too far is that we try to over-regulate and to micromanage many processes. I think this came out of an environmental meeting. I mean, this really stayed in my mind after a Ministers of Environment meeting when we were asked to bring with us a representative of industry. So we were sitting there all together and discussing EU legislation. And the EU did have a tendency to try to over-regulate. And the business there said, listen, we want politics, we want governments to give us the goal and leave us space to find the solutions ourselves. Because if we try to over-regulate and to micromanage, we will not be able to keep up with the progress that is actually necessary in order to get the innovation, to get innovative practices and new technologies through. And some of this is happening through these simplifications. One very nice example of this that I quote often is what the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, not your file, it's not ENVI, but Klima. But you know, when this initiative, when we first put in place this initiative, the idea is good, that when you import goods that have lower tax on CO2 than what we tax ourselves through the emission trading scheme, that you apply this tax at the border when something is being imported into the EU, in order to have it include the same cost of carbon that we include in our own production. And we are, well, this is set to be implemented, but we're in preparation already. But the simplification was done in a manner that thresholds were set up. So if you import less than so much and so much of aluminium, you will not, you do not have any procedures with this. Only if you import more. And the threshold was able to be set at, these thresholds were able to be set at such level that 90% of all procedures have dropped away, but still, I believe the figure by the Commission was 99%, but even if it's 95 plus, it doesn't matter. 95% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are embedded in all of the imports are still being addressed. They're still kept within the system. And it's this easing of legislation for smaller producers, for smaller, for small companies that we have to do across the board. We've had this also, the same case also happened with farmers' demonstrations, if you remember them, around 2 years ago, when also the Commission said, then implemented that, or then finally proposed that thresholds, smaller farmers are excused from some obligations. You still maintain control over the big polluters, but you don't regulate overall. And this overregulation is not only one of the main symptoms or the main symptom in the Draghi report on what is holding back the EU economy, but it's also one thing that, at least according to Fukuyama, is the main source of populist and even authoritarian governments or politicians. Fukuyama was here a couple of months ago. If you know the book End of History, he speaks about the liberal state, so a state built on checks and balances, respect of rule of law, democracy, etc. And he said that the amount of liberal countries is for the first time declining now. And the reason to this, according to him, was the inefficiency of the liberal order. So because we regulate many things become slower or almost impossible. He mentioned that the high-speed rail between Los Angeles and San Francisco is taking decades to be made. And at the same time, in China, you've had thousands of kilometers of high-speed rail that is being built. And because of these inabilities, and it is because of, well, sometimes poorer legislation, or legislation that needs to be cleaned up, you have the joy of populists coming in and authoritarians saying, because something is not being done, we will do it and we will do it faster. And this is the other extreme, which is also which is definitely not the future we want. So looking for the balance between all of this is not an easy task, but.
And simplification is now the new word. We already got some oohs and ahs here from the civil society and industry, but financing, Mr. Mamer, is usually the bottleneck as well. So how does the EU ensure that the funds and the tools are more accessible for circular
So
economy?
there seems to be a relatively liberal
environment.
No, there seems to be a very liberal management of the answers to the question. So first I'm going to react to the simplification issue. First, as a joke, I hope we agree that it's not EU overregulation that is stopping the Americans from building high-speed rail in their country. Thank God for that, because in Europe, despite heavy regulation, we have a really good, I'm French, I know something about high-speed rail, I use it all the time. We have a pretty efficient and dense high-speed rail network. Other countries have it.
Permitting is still a problem.
Permitting is a problem. I'll come to that in a second. So, the issue of simplification is very important. You're right, and it is indeed at the core of President von der Leyen's current mandate. And I insist on the fact that we say simplification, not deregulation, because we do not want to abandon the goals, and everything that you have said show that the environment in which we are operating has become much tougher. But let me remind you that one of the first actions that this new Commission took was to set a goal for 2040 in terms of reduction target, of reduction of CO2 emissions. And it's a very ambitious goal, and it's, of course, provoking a lot of debate. So the wording may not be exactly as it was before, but the intentions are still completely there. The other thing about simplification is that when I talk to stakeholders from industry, I had a meeting like this last week. It was quite funny because there were 3 or 4 of them. I won't say which sector. And they were asking for simplification in their area. Please make sure that when we are renewing a permit for an existing installation that does X, I won't say what sector, things go much faster. Oh, but do not simplify the reporting requirements on the factory which is somewhere upstream and whose emissions influence our work. So you see, we want simplification. Everyone wants simplification for ourselves, but we want to make sure that the environment in which we operate continues to be regulated in a way that allows us to do our work correctly. So it's a very, very tricky business. Another example, which is really striking, is extended producer responsibility. the scheme which actually puts obligations on economic operators to take care of used products once they are going to be discarded so that they can be recycled. And you would think that we have a single market, and therefore that you would ask the producer, wherever he is in the EU, to be responsible for waste everywhere, and for member states to interact with that producer wherever he is. But no. In the negotiations on the legislation, it was decided that a producer had to have a representative in every member state, which makes things amazingly complicated for small and medium-sized businesses in particular that don't have that and that simply want to export from their country, Slovenia, to the rest of the EU, right? So simplification is actually a very complicated business when you are trying to make sure that you do not lose on the wayside the advantages of the policies that you have defined. Now, to come to your point on financing. Now, we have, I'm going to talk about EU financing. We have a multi-annual financial framework that runs from 21 to 27, and which is set as it is, which is that you have financing for environmental projects and circular economy projects in many, many different programs. And it would take me too long to go through that. What is interesting, I think, is the future. And the future is the proposal that the Commission has made for the next multi-annual financial framework, which will simplify this drastically, because fundamentally we will have three big windows. The first will be national and regional plans. And there you will have the objective of having 35% of expenditure, either for climate or for the environment, I mean, for both an integrated manner, integrated in regional policies, in agricultural policies, in transport policies, etc., but according to a strategy that is determined by the member state in partnership with the Commission. Then we will, and this will help us, for example, finance nature restoration, nature protection, biodiversity, etc. Then you will have a second window, which is the European Competitiveness Fund, which will be there to finance and scale projects that, and investments that will contribute significantly, in particular to the transition to a clean or green economy, to the clean transition. So this is core financing for the circular economy. And then you have a third window on Global Europe, which is for action in the rest of the world, where this will be important as well. And this should normally lead to investors and project promoters to have a much clearer view and a more streamlined access to EU financing, but of course, requiring them in the first window, the partnership plans with the member states, to actually work with the member states on this financing, or to answer calls for interest in the second window of the European Competitiveness Fund. A lot of information. I hope I was clear.
So we had a lot of examples, about the mood in the society. How do you see, where are your problems? Because we have really people from different fields, from civil society to certain industries. Could we have maybe a question, a good example, or an issue that you have? It would be really nice hearing your voice as well, since we have policymakers over here, representatives of the Commission. So, how many are already involved with circular economy today, present? Yeah, it's a number, because if we go to concrete actions, you mentioned some examples as well, but where could Slovenia really be a good example in the future? We talked about the past a little bit and what we did, and which supply chain could produce the lowest, like, waste, and or zero waste even?
I think one of the reasons I think one of the objectives of the Slovenian Center for Circular Economy is to have a cross-sectoral effect, to have an effect in the society the ecosystem of the whole society, because everybody has to work together. So I'm really not a fan of saying this sector or that. We applauded that the Critical and Strategic Materials Act. We think that's very, very important. We obviously, electrical and electronic waste will be a resource in the future. When we talk about business models, and Susanna told us some good examples, I think that extended producer responsibility will have a completely different function once the producer remains the owner of the product and will be in charge just of operation, repair and maintenance. So I think we will see changes, but what we see as a positive effect is that everybody has to collaborate. All of the standard things that are important for the circular economy: systems thinking, collaboration, innovation, transparency, governance. Did I forget something? And this has to be human. Okay, governance. So, but we have to work as a society.
Mm-hmm. Does this resound with everything you do so far? Yes, can I hear your voice? We will have a question from the audience.
Thank you. Hi, very interesting discussion. Thank you. My name is Sophie Schop from the Netherlands, representing REP. I'm the executive director for REP in Europe. REP is, well, we call ourselves the environmental NGO focused on waste in especially food and textiles when it comes to our European focus. And what could tremendously help as well, we were talking about finance and supporting impact, and what you currently see is that there's a lot of projects that move forward for like 2-3 years maximum. I think when you talk about change also takes time. So I think it will be incredible to hear your view on longer term funding opportunities, longer and bigger collaborations, because I think that's also incremental for changing the way we work and operate.
Sophie, thank you so much for this point of view. So maybe Mr. Weigel.
Well, I think it's on the one side. I think it's important what I mentioned earlier on, that regulation sets goals, and the micromanagement along the way on route is the one that I feel needs to be reviewed. That the setting of goals, I think, is an absolute necessity, and I think it is the role of states to say what kind of a future we want. And I miss in everyday life in our interministerial debates, I miss this a lot, especially with the Ministry of Finance, to say it bluntly. I say it because if I speak with my colleagues from other states, they have the same they have the same perspective. I mentioned earlier on, for instance, green public procurement. I think it is an aspect where Slovenia has good examples and can be considered quite a good practice. We've had green public procurement obligatory since 2012, one of the first EU member states to have done such a step, and currently already about 1/3 of our public procurement has set environmental has environmental demands included. Some of the obligatory ones, also some of the voluntary ones. We've done a lot of work with the ones that are doing the public procurement in order for them to realize why this is important, and also to give them the know-how and tools how to actually do this, because this was perceived to be one of the biggest obstacles. However, one thing that we cannot go over is that that sometimes we need more upfront investment for these things, that many environmentally sound solutions are, from a full life cycle perspective, are cheaper. However, They would need a bigger upfront investment. And when you have a Ministry of Finance whose overarching goal momentary is to balance this year's budget and to look at N+1 and N+2, then a lot of focus, too much focus is on this. And you cannot get into perspective of more long-term views. Commission had done a really good thing this with the attempt that the 2040 target would be put alongside the clean industrial deal. The idea was really to have this go hand in hand. The 2040 was delayed a little bit, but we're still better on track than we have been when all of these policies were done very much in parallel. I think we need to promote from our views and politicians stronger longer term perspective.
Can we have your opinion as well?
Yes,
about
I mean,
everything that Sophie was saying in long term.
Thank you. A couple of points. Obviously, public money is limited for lots of reasons, and an extremely high number of priorities that need to be financed at the same time. The second thing is that because it is limited, we need to try to shift as much as possible from a logic of grants to a logic of investments. And the concept that we are working on a lot in the European Commission is what we call the investment journey. And it is this long-term vision that you are talking about in terms of accompanying projects through a menu, fundamentally, a sequenced menu, if I could say, of financing, where you would focus grants where it is absolutely clear that you have a great idea, but it's currently not bankable, right? But you need to limit that to those cases, because if you start dishing out grants to everyone, fundamentally you cannot scale up, you cannot actually leverage the public financing, and public financing is way below what we need in order to finance the circular economy, since it's the subject of today's debate. So it's this balance between grants and basically seed money that will allow to draw in public and private investors, and in particular, of course, as far as we are concerned, the European Investment Bank, that is our privileged partner to do that. The second thing, and is linked to that as well, is the fact that many projects at the beginning are very, very small, and therefore they have a hard time attracting attention from investors. In Europe, we already have a lot of problems in terms of a dearth of venture capital, and in that area even more, because the markets are often not mature enough, and they have the capacity to choose between different types of markets that they can finance. So what we need to try to do is to bring together projects in an area, perhaps, so that they can represent a sufficient volume in terms of market potential that will attract the interest of institutional or private investors. And the third thing is, of course, we need to differentiate between the different phases of a project. We know that there are actually 2 or 3 valleys of death, as the vocabulary says. The first is from your successful research to a demonstrator plant, when we're talking about products. The second is from the demonstrator plant then to industrial production. And then finally, it's really scaling up and being able to serve a very big market and even export. And of course, you're not talking about the same amounts, you're not talking about the same investors, therefore, and you're not talking about the same mechanisms to finance your project. But we are fully aware of that. It's at the center of the logic of the European Competitiveness Fund that I was mentioning before. There are lots and lots of things which will need to be discussed with member states, obviously, in terms of how it is set up, but that's the logic we are trying to follow.
Sophie, have we answered your question more or less? Yes, we could continue. I have another question from the gentleman in the blue shirt over there at the end.
Thank you. Very, very interesting discussion. David Greenfield from the Circular Economy Institute. I think one of the things, I've just spent the last 9 months working on the creation of the English circular economy strategy. And we've been looking at the levers of government for circularity. And 2 very much we've already heard from today in terms of procurement. Planning and regulation is one that hasn't been mentioned. We're very much actively looking at how both national and regional governments can be the facilitator of circularity. How can we put in place procurement specifications that are ensuring that circularity is embedded in new builds? And we've got to be very, very clear that future circularity in new is the most influenceable bit of circularity at the moment. The stuff that we're currently sitting in, we can try and be as circular as possible, but for anything new, government should be at the forefront of determining that circularity is the specification for the future. Just welcome thoughts from the panel on that.
I mentioned before our public procurement. We've gone to some extent in making it more green and making it more environmental, but to really make it circular, we would have to go further steps. I mean, I think many of us know these examples of, for instance, I don't know, of buying services rather than goods. So I think Schiphol Airport has been procured in a manner that you specify how many lumen or light you need in the space, and you pay for this light. You do not pay for the light bulb, which you're then responsible to have another public procurement to change it, and then light as a service, exactly. There has been the Utrecht, to sticking with the Netherlands, which I really think are doing a good job on this. I think it's Utrecht, the byway, the highway. It's made in a design, build, finance, and operate, something like that is the scheme. So instead of the way that we still make highways in Slovenia is somebody takes up a loan, pays for the highway, we collect fees, and we're paying each month to return the loan. In that case, it was one company that itself took out the loan, built the highway, and the government or regional or whoever will be paying them a monthly fee to use for the use of this highway. Now, if the highway requires reconstruction work and its use is limited for a while, they get less funding. That means that it's automatically built in a way that needs less repair. On the other hand, if repairs are needed, they are done quickly because it's a loss of funding for them. So a win-win solution for all. I think we would still have to pilot such schemes, have them compare. It's a new mindset. It's a different mindset. And in public administration, getting people to do the same thing in new ways is a huge challenge. So I mean, my only suggestion for answer to this is to increase the capacity of public service, to work on teaching public servants, us as well, on soft methods of working, rather than learning how you're supposed to do things, to learn how to learn critical thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, project management, soft skills, and hopefully with this we will progress. But one thing that is important is meetings such as this, or the circular meetings in Brussels, any places where we come together and speak to each other about what we've done. There is good practices overall. If we would just manage to replicate as much of this, we would be much further on the way of circularity.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, because we are really a bit late, and tomorrow is another day where we can discuss even further, because we haven't even mentioned crossover opportunities, so many things. Sophie has mentioned food waste, textile waste, which is like they're 2 hot topics, so lots of interesting things to discuss tomorrow as well. I would just like to ask you, since we are in a time of transition, we've mentioned that a couple of times, what to do to make circular economy really here and now a functioning economy in one sentence from all of you, please. Simplification. Just to sum up.
To sum up, I think it's realizing that the long-term and long-term thinking ultimately is cheaper and more qualitative than short-term thinking. But then it's all about how you actually get that to work in reality. But it's a mental shift.
It's a mental shift
on the part of everybody, from the public to the private sectors to citizens and consumers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Weigel.
Yeah, I do another one. I'm an economist, so I think that we can still do some way in price signals, through perhaps taxation at most, but also in other manners to make sure that sustainable solutions are relatively cheaper than unsustainable alternatives, and you can do some of this through proper tax incentives.
Thank you, Mr. Frangisch.
I'm a big fan of the proposal on European Competitiveness Fund. Thank you to the European Commission that you have followed the Mario Draghi recommendation and to improve the access to finance in all stages of the innovation process, as well as of the deployment of those innovations into industrial practices. However, and this is maybe also my way to answer Sophie's question, use innovative public procurement as much as possible. We would like to promote this also within Slovenia in order to use public procurement not for the service or product you'll need next week, but a product you'll need in few years' time, for this product to be developed, tested, demonstrated, industrialized. And I think it's a great way to support both the emerging of our new industries as well as our future public needs.
And Mrs. Bozic, the one with a lot of practice with the companies.
I would say keep things simple. So accessible, so everybody can understand and cooperate and do their best.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this discussion. We had a great start today and a lot of interesting things to discuss tomorrow. Thank you so much. And while our guests are more comfortable and taking their seats, we can quickly check your answers to our 4 questions. Can I have the graphics here behind? Because we were asking you, which circular activity do you miss in your city? And the most answers were like more options to borrow appliances, tools, and equipment. That's a very interesting one. And what circular advice would you give to politicians? We have more than 25% answered travel less by plane and use public transport. We see the Commission loves to travel by train. Yes. And we have another question. So how often do you consider to repair or repairing before buying a new product? So how often do you consider? And 33% answered often, because I want to use the product as long as possible. Is this true? Wonderful. Wonderful. And let's check just the last question. So what do you do with products you no longer use? And we have 35% answering, I donate them to reuse, to the centers, charities, or for recycling. That's our people. Thank you for your answers today. Now I invite you to join us in front of the building. Buses will be picking us up to take us up to the castle, to enjoy the evening, to communicate a bit more, to network. And we can use the funicular as well. So we will just gather down the cafe downstairs and use our transport to the castle. Thank you so much for today, and I will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.